Hello everybody, and welcome to Object Classes of the SCP Foundation. The following is a list of the primary and non-standard SCP object classes. Please note that this is not every object class in existence. There are way more. This is just the tip of the iceberg. I cannot give you all the object classes yet, because I have found little to no information about the other object classes. So here are the primary and non-standard object classes for the SCP Foundation. All anomalous objects, entities, and phenomena requiring special containment procedures are assigned an object class. An object class is a part of the standard SCP template and serves as a rough indicator for how difficult an object is to contain. In universe, object classes are for the purpose of identifying containment needs, research priority, budgeting, and other considerations. An SCP's object class is determined by the number of factors, but the most important factors are the difficulty and the purpose of its containment. Safe class SCPs are anomalies that are easily and safely contained. This is often due to the fact that the Foundation has researched the SCP well enough that containment does not require significant resources, or that the anomalies require specific and conscious activation or trigger. Classifying an SCP as safe, however, does not mean that handling or activating it does not pose a threat. If you give it the locked box test, if you put it in the box and it does nothing, then it's probably a safe class. A good example of a safe class anomaly would be SCP-999. Euclid. Euclid class SCPs are anomalies that require more resources to contain completely, or where containment isn't always reliable. Usually this is because the SCP is insufficiently understood or inherently unpredictable. Euclid is the object class with the greatest scope, and it's usually a safe bet that an SCP will be this class if it doesn't easily fall into any of the other standard object classes. As a note, any SCP that's autonomous, sentient, and/or sapient is generally classified as Euclid, due to the inherent unpredictability of an object that can act or think on its own. If you give it the locked box test, if you put it in a box and you're not sure what it will do, then it is probably a Euclid class anomaly. A good example of a Euclid class object would be SCP-173. Keter. Keter class SCPs are anomalies that are exceedingly difficult to contain consistently or reliably. With containment procedures often being extensive and complex, the Foundation often can't contain these SCPs, well due to not having a solid understanding of the anomaly or lacking the technology to properly contain or counter it. A Keter SCP does not mean the SCP is dangerous, just that it is simply very difficult or costly to contain. If you give it the locked box test, and if you put it in the box and it breaks out easily, then it is probably a Keter. A good example of a Keter class anomaly would be SCP-106. Thaumiel. Thaumiel class SCPs are anomalies that the Foundation specifically uses to contain other SCPs. Even the mere existence of Thaumiel class objects is classified at the highest levels of the Foundation, and their locations, functions, and current status are known to few Foundation personnel outside of the O5 Council. If you give it the locked box test, and it is the box, then it probably is Thaumiel. A good example of a Thaumiel class entity would be SCP-3000. Apollyon. Apollyon class SCPs are anomalies that cannot be contained, are expected to breach containment imminently, or some other similar scenario. Such anomalies are usually associated with world-ending threats or a K-class scenario of some kind, and require a massive effort from the Foundation to deal with. If you give it the locked box test, if it doesn't fit in the box, then it's probably Apollyon. A good example of an Apollyon class SCP would be SCP-001 When Day Breaks. Archon. Archon class SCPs are anomalies that could theoretically be contained, but are best left uncontained for some reason. Archon SCPs may be part of the consensus reality that is difficult to fully contain, or may have adverse effects if put into containment. These SCPs are not uncontainable. The defining feature of the class is that the Foundation chooses to not put the anomaly in containment. If you give it the locked box test, if you choose to not put it in the box, then it's probably Archon. A good example of an Archon class SCP would be SCP-3455. Neutralized. Neutralized SCPs are anomalies that are no longer anomalous, either through have been intentionally or accidentally destroyed or disabled. There is no locked box test. A good example of a neutralized SCP would be SCP-1762. Explained. Explained SCPs are commonly articles about anomalies that are completely and fully understood to the point where their effects are now explainable by mainstream science or phenomena that have been debunked or falsely mistaken as an anomaly. There is no locked box test. A good example of an explained SCP would be SCP-1548-EX. Pending. SCP articles that have not yet been assigned an object class may be labeled as pending. This is used to indicate that the Foundation is actively researching the anomaly, but doesn't have enough information yet to give it an object class. This is a deliberate decision to emphasize that a story is ongoing, and isn't the same as the author not knowing which object class to assign. There is no locked box test. A good example of a pending class SCP would be SCP-3030. Thank you all for watching this video. I hope you all enjoyed. Please note that this is not every object class in existence. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more classes that I have not been able to find any information about. I haven't really been able to find any wiki pages about it. There's something called Keter Dark, which I saw an SCP with that tag, but have not been able to find any information about those classes. If anybody does happen to have any information about these classes, like a link with explanations, please comment the link down below. I would really appreciate it. If I find enough of these lesser known classes, I'll definitely do a part 2. Thank you all for watching. Please like and subscribe, turn notifications on, yada yada yada. And remember, there is no Site 5.